Coming up on Network Africa, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa sent his best wishes to U.S. President Donald Trump and his wife as they test positive for coronavirus. Namibia's health ministry says over 300 students have contracted the virus since schools reopened. Plus, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says he will not approve U.S. drone strikes on Al-Shabaab militants on Kenyan soil. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin today in Zimbabwe, where President Emmerson Mnangagwa has sent his best wishes to U.S. President Donald Trump and his wife after they tested positive for COVID-19. Mr. Trump and First Lady Melania Trump announced today that they are self-isolating, and their physician added that the couple will remain within the White House during their convalescence. Relations between the two countries have been tense since the U.S. imposed financial and travel restrictions on individuals and companies it accuses of gross violations of human rights in Zimbabwe. Some of the restrictions started 20 years ago, and President Mnangagwa is among those sanctioned. In Namibia, over 300 students in the country have caught coronavirus since their schools reopened. The Ministry of Health says most cases are in boarding schools. Health Minister Kalumbi Shangula says it is important for safety guidelines to be followed to stop transmissions in closed areas like school buildings. Namibia closed schools in March because of the pandemic and then reopened them in June, with the authorities citing an absence of local transmissions. Well, over in Uganda, the Health Ministry has revised its protocol for discharging COVID-19 patients that will see asymptomatic patients leave hospitals without a retest. Health Minister Jane Akeng says patients who have been in isolation for 10 days will be discharged without testing if they do not show any symptoms. This is expected to reduce the number of days that patients wait to be discharged after the first test. Previously, patients could only be discharged after having 2 negative tests, but some patients had complained about the time spent waiting for the confirmatory tests despite not showing any symptoms. Uganda has to date confirmed 8,287 coronavirus cases, including 4,430 recoveries and 75 deaths. Let's take you now to the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to meet Esperance Nyabintu and her son Ebenezer, who survived the Ebola virus in Goma. Shunned by her community and her family, Esperance lives alone with her son and the orphans she adopted. Now she's worried that COVID-19 could end up killing more people than Ebola did in the region.
For Esperance Nyabintu, catching Ebola was a curse and a gift from God. A year ago, the virus killed her husband. Most of her neighbors, friends and family abandoned her, such as the social stigma of surviving the disease. Undaunted by the challenge of bringing up 10 children alone, she has become a social worker, supporting other ostracized survivors like herself in the East of Democratic Republic of Congo. The epidemic, the second largest Ebola outbreak since the virus was identified in 1976, has given her an enduring sense of purpose.
When I was told that I was positive with Ebola, I was so frustrated. I later understood that it was a disease like any other and can be cured.
One of her neighbors, Kikandi Luko, said most people shunned Nyabintu after she recovered because they feared she remained infectious, but their friendship prevailed.
When the neighbors heard about Ebola, everyone stayed away. I asked people to think of Ebola as any disease and that people should come and visit her because she is fine.
For those living in the eastern Congo, the highly contagious novel coronavirus has complicated an already dire situation as the region struggles from armed conflict and the recent fight against Ebola. A young group of volunteers have created Goma Active, an organization that helps raise awareness in the city of Goma. By shouting coronavirus prevention measures through loudspeakers and handing out leaflets and stickers asking people to wear masks and social distance, they hope to make a difference.
The family of Paul Rusesabagina, the former hotel manager whose efforts during the 1994 Rwanda genocide helped save hundreds of Tutsis, has called on the international community to appeal for his release from prison. His family allege he was kidnapped in Dubai and taken to Rwanda.
Paul Rusesabagina, who was portrayed as a hero in the popular Hollywood film Hotel Rwanda, has lived in exile in Belgium and the US, where he was a prominent critic of Rwandan President Paul Kagame. He returned to Rwanda and was arrested in August. He was charged with terrorism and other offenses last month. His daughter, Karine Kanimba, called for help at an online news conference.
We are working very closely with the consular office, the Belgian embassy in Rwanda. However, we need more action. It hasn't been enough, clearly, and we don't know exactly what the current prison he's in looks like.
His family has alleged he was kidnapped, but Rusesabagina told the New York Times that he had been tricked into boarding a private jet he believed was bound for Burundi and then was arrested when he touched down in Rwanda. His family said he has been denied his choice of defense lawyers.
You know, when we see that and he speaks and he talks in the New York Times and he tells the New York Times what happened to him and then is okay with the lawyers are apparently okay with the lawyers that are forced on him. We know that this is not okay. We know that this is a work of the Rwandan government. This is how they've treated prisoners in the past. We have examples like Kizito, who was killed by the Rwandan government in the recent months, who also was denied his own legal representation. And that's why our family is very scared with this behavior of the government today, because this isn't the first time. And when we last saw this, the person ended up dead.
American lawyer Peter Robinson, appointed by Rusesabagina's family with 6 other lawyers, has called on the US, Belgium and the European Union to put pressure on the Rwandan government to free Rusesabagina. Rwanda has said his trial will be quick, fair and public, but his family wants him freed.
In North Africa, the delegations representing the government of the National Accord and the Libyan Arab Armed Forces have concluded 2 days of security and military talks. According to the United Nations, the discussions were marked by spirited responsibility, transparency and mutual trust.
The UN support mission in Libya, UNSMIL, said that delegations representing the government of National Accord and the Libyan Arab Armed Forces and comprising of police, military officers have concluded 2 days of security and military talks. Those talks were facilitated by the UN support mission in Libya and held in Egypt, in Hurghada. The mission says the discussions were marked by a spirit of responsibility, transparency, and mutual trust. They addressed a number of pressing security and military issues, including confidence-building measures, security arrangements, and tasks and responsibilities of the Petroleum Facilities Guard. The mission welcomes the outcomes reached during the discussion. UNSMIL hopes that this positive development will contribute to paving the way towards a final and lasting ceasefire agreement.
Since 1998, National Nanny Recognition Week has been observed in the last week of September every year to recognize and celebrate nannies. It's a week set aside for families, the media, and the government to project the positive sides of nannies and other domestic staff and the need for them to be appreciated for what they do. For nannies, it's a time to celebrate the wonderful work they do and the difference they make in the lives of the children in their care and the families whom they serve. Mrs. Ngozi Chukwu Etuk is the CEO of Otis Keepers Limited, Uyo, an agency that's dedicated to finding childcare for families and household staff placement. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Now, taking into account the amount of the Nigerian population that rely and make use of nannies, how was this week celebrated, and how did you encourage employers to celebrate their staff?
Okay, thank you. Here in Nigeria, it's not really something that is known. So for us, we actually started from creating the awareness, letting families know the need to celebrate their nannies. And by awareness, we mean what we did was to get onto social media, sensitize the public on the need to celebrate their nannies. We had billboards at different locations in the city here in Uyo, where we posted for families to recognize that this week has been set aside and that they should just come out and say thank you and appreciate the work that their families or their nannies are doing for their families. So it's more of an awareness. We created that awareness for families to understand that there's a time like this and to appreciate their nannies.
Indeed, the Sustainable Development Goal 8 is to ensure decent work and sustainable economic growth. It's no news that in Africa and even other parts of the world, domestic workers aren't always treated fairly. How do we bridge this gap to ensure that they are paid decently and also are protected against harassment while earning a living?
Okay, it starts first of all by Nigeria as a nation coming to realize that there's no difference between work within the domestic sector and work in the corporate sector. And as a result of that, as a nation, we need to also look at the fact that we can tap into that industry and structure the industry. In Nigeria, the domestic sector has no structure at all. There are no laws governing the activities of domestic workers. And as a result, we really do not have decent work for these people. And by decent work, we begin to talk about things like fair wage, zero discrimination, zero violence and harassment, and all of that. Good and proper terms of employment. Those are things that come under the whole ideology behind them. Decent. And that's one thing that the domestic workers do not enjoy at all. So as an agency, it's one of our key advocacy. So we're advocating and creating that awareness, hoping that someday the country will see the need to create structure around that department or around that sector. So for us, decent work is what we are advocating for. We have the templates, we have the structure. We're hoping that Nigeria, we will be able to work with the key relevant agencies and government to create the legal and the policy framework that will guard against the infringement of rights of domestic workers in Nigeria.
Indeed, there's another sad trend that tends to pop in this sector, and that's child labor. How can we eradicate this?
Okay. Well, we're still on bringing up legal and policy framework. When there is a proper legal and policy framework around domestic work, definitely it will be clear and clearly stated that children are not supposed to work as domestic workers. That's one thing that is trending in the society, and it is really sad. So, but when we have laws, that guard against this, it will totally eradicate that. When we have laws that say no child labor, and then we also have punitive measures for defaulters, then we can say that we are on the road to eradicating that, which is why we're calling on the relevant agencies and stakeholders to come up and create a structure so that through that structure we can eradicate the use of children within the domestic sector.
All right then, Ngozi Chukwu Etuk, CEO Otis Keepers, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead on the program. Our Africa Tech segment takes a look at how e-learning is being used to boost education amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says that he will not approve U.S. drone strikes on Al-Shabaab militants on Kenyan soil. The president, who is on a state visit to France, told the local media that he has not yet received such a request. The New York Times had last month quoted unnamed sources from the U.S. government as saying that the U.S. military was seeking approval to carry out drone strikes against Al-Shabaab targets in eastern Kenya. The report came days before a military court in Somalia sentenced an Islamist militant to life in prison for his role in a deadly attack on a U.S. base in Kenya. It was the first attack by Al-Shabaab militants on U.S. forces in Kenya. Still in Kenya, the Great Rift Valley has witnessed rising water levels for months now following heavy rains. The main gate to Lake Nakuru National Park has been totally submerged by rising water levels. There are fears that Lake Baringo and Lake Bogoria, one fresh and the other saline, will contaminate each other. The flooding has forced thousands of people to flee their homes and has submerged huge areas of farmland. Illegal deforestation is said to have left most areas vulnerable to floodwaters. The sizes of lakes have almost doubled, and the authorities have been forced to create alternative routes to the park surrounding the lakes. Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. The COVID-19 pandemic caused the closure of several learning institutions globally. But while students stayed home, schools found a way to keep them busy through e-learning, giving education technology an upskill. In this next report, we look at how an ed-tech startup has been able to bridge the education gap.
The COVID-19 pandemic is having its effect on the global economy, including the education sector, proving to many educational institutions, parents, and even students just how much technology can enhance the learning process. Although EdTech, that is, education technology, is nothing new, the concept has recently become a buzzword as various schools and educators latch on to e-learning platforms to help students have a more comprehensive learning process. The pandemic gave EdTech an upscale when most students were at home, but Oluwakoyejo Oluwatosin with his team were already ahead of the times.
The company was built on a robust engine called the Universal Test Engine, and that was my final year project in the university. So we're like 7 years ahead of our time. Why? Because when we developed the software, it was designed to help students take exams using computers, and that was in 2007. That was 7 years before JAMB went CBT.
With a goal to provide every Nigerian child with quality basic education at primary and secondary school levels, Chronicles Software Development Company made another unprecedented move in 2013.
We looked down the road, we needed to tell ourselves the truth, that there's going to be a time whereby learning devices will be the buzzword. So in 2013, we started research. It took us 3 years in the offering. We started Success Star. All the digital learning resources of the secondary school curriculum is digitized into the tablets. So everything a child needs to learn from JS1 to JS3 in accordance with the Nigerian curriculum is there. And we also ensure that schools can also digitize their own customized solutions into the device.
With different ideas and digital platforms popping up to help bridge the education gap orchestrated by the pandemic, Oluwakoyejo says his company has also joined the train.
When the lockdown happened, we saw it as an opportunity for us to launch the Unified Learning Platform. So what does it do? It has your learning content, it has your testing content, it provides an analytic dashboard for parents and schools to be able to track learning outcomes.
Despite the technological challenges faced in the country, there's been a rise in the growth of edtech startups who perhaps are changing the narrative. But how are we really faring?
The good is that, without the four walls of the classroom, learning can still happen. That has been really, really validated. Now, the bad is that not everybody has access to this kind of learning experiences, and that is troubling. Then also, the ugly side is that we're still struggling with regulation, government regulation on how these could really be a pivotal part of learning.
With e-learning fast becoming a valuable alternative to physical classroom interactions, it could be safe to say that the attempt to online learning may be an opportunity to reshape the way education is perceived.
After a prolonged ban on visas, Nigerians in the United Arab Emirates can now heave a sigh of relief as the Dubai government has projected the nation's flag on its most iconic building, the Burj Khalifa. Nigeria's flag was displayed at 8 p.m. local time on Thursday night. This gesture, in celebration of Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary, is seen as an end to the silent diplomatic row between both countries and a green light for economic activities to resume. Our correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, has more on the story.
Nigeria's national flag is projected onto the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, in honor of the nation's 60th independence anniversary. For 4 minutes, the building is painted green, white, green.
We are happy with the United Arab Emirates government for hosting the Nigerian flag at Burj Khalifa. That goes a long way to show the kind of cordial relationship we both have, which has dated for a long period of time, and is a show of solidarity they've given to Nigeria as we celebrate our 60th anniversary, and we're grateful.
It is the first time the Dubai government will project Nigeria's flag in such a manner, a move that Nigerian nationals resident in the United Arab Emirates perceive as a goodwill gesture and sign that tensions between the UAE and Nigeria have been resolved.
This is the first time we are seeing Nigerian flag display in this tallest building. You understand? It's actually a sign of good relationship between Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates. It's actually a sign of new beginning.
We are so happy to witness this celebration. We are saying thanks to UAE government that give us the privilege to celebrate our dear country.
This display in the heart of the tourist city comes less than 24 hours after Nigeria's aviation minister tweeted Emirates flights have now been reapproved following the UAE's readiness to lift visa ban on Nigerians, a claim the Arab nation previously denied. Several Nigerians have reported difficulty obtaining and renewing their visas, leading many businesses and personal plans to a standstill. They now await the reopening.
Can I send the message without telling them that?
And that's it on the program for today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Have a great weekend.